Senko Hanabi sparklers are unique among all other fireworks. A Senko Hanabi contains less than 1/10 of 1 gram of combustible powder, and all of it burns away in the first few seconds the firework is lit. Most fireworks would end as soon as the powder has been burned, but for a Senko Hanabi, this is only the start. The glowing ash that remains behind slowly transforms into a ball, a liquid drop of complex sulfur, potassium, and carbon molecules. The drop seems quiet for a while after it forms, but then, in the second stage, it begins to emit sparks. They start as a single spark, then explode and branch into 1,000 others with an audible pop. This lasts a short time, and then the sparks become smaller, but much more frequent, a third stage. As the crackling dies off, it looks like the sparkler may finally be finished, but this is actually the last, and the longest lasting of the 4 stages. From the small drop that remains, small gentle sparks keep coming. This time they don't branch, they shoot straight outwards or rain down. This can last minutes as the tiny drop climbs upward, slowly burning away the rest of the paper until it finally cools down and stops. An entire miniature fireworks show from a scoop of powder the size of a housefly. This video is sponsored by Tab for a Cause. You can raise money for charitable organizations every time you open a new tab in your browser. Learn more and get the free extension through the link in the video description below. Some of you may remember my earlier video about how to make Senko Hanabi sparklers. I had been working for more than 10 years before I came up with a method that worked reliably enough to be shown in a video, and even then I was not satisfied with the results. I had never seen a real Senko Hanabi in person, as they are very rare outside of their country of origin, Japan, and very complex to reproduce from the ground up, as I had been attempting to do. This last year, a Japanese TV show took interest in my efforts to recreate Senko Hanabi, and offered to fly me to Japan if I would allow them to film my experience in learning from a Senko Hanabi master. I said yes, but only if I could bring a camera of my own. This is the man I went to see. This is Ryota Tsutsui, a 3rd-generation firework builder and owner of the toy fireworks company Tsutsui Tokimasa, which was started by and is named after his grandfather. Ryota Tsutsui is one of only 2 remaining craftsmen in all of Japan that still make Senko Hanabi, as they have been made for many hundreds of years. The first time I saw a Senko Hanabi in person was right here. This is the Tsutsui Tokimasa headquarters, a small collection of buildings surrounded by vineyards and rice paddies. In the office is a small showroom with all the fireworks Tsutsui Tokimasa offers, mostly handheld fireworks and sparklers of various kinds. The craftsmanship is stunning. These are decorative Senko Hanabi gift boxes that use the sparklers as stems for origami flowers. This skillful work with paper is not only beautiful, I would soon learn it's a very important part in creating any Senko Hanabi, not only these decorative ones. Tsutsui-san gave me a tour of the factory buildings to see where some of the fireworks are assembled. These, for example, are large pellets of a metallic sparkler composition which goes in the end of a long tube. This is basically a fountain firework that you can hold in your hands. In another building, other sparklers were being prepared by filling bundles of tubes made of newspaper. Once filled, they'll be attached to a stick and given a decorative wrapping. All of these fireworks are made in bulk by people working here at the factory, but Senko Hanabi are different. They are very carefully made, one at a time, mostly by local retirees. There are about 30 people Tsutsui-san is taught to make Senko Hanabi from carefully cut strips of paper and a secret powder recipe that he prepares in advance. The ingredients of the recipe are not a secret. Tsutsui-san was happy to share them with me even as we were followed by a camera crew. The secret is in the ratio in which they are combined. There are 3 components in a Senko Hanabi mixture: potassium nitrate, sulfur, and carbon. These are the very first ingredients that were used to make fireworks in the ancient world. and still today they are used to make fireworks of all kinds. Among these 3 ingredients, carbon is the most important for a Senko Hanabi. It can take many forms, from the charcoal in a barbecue to the graphite in a pencil. Tsutsui-san uses a form of carbon called shoen, a Japanese word that means pine soot. In English, this form of carbon is more commonly known as lamp black. You've probably seen lamp black before if you've ever run a spoon through a candle flame. The soot it leaves behind is a very fine, very oily form of carbon. Instead of a candle flame, the lamp black used to make Senko Hanabi is collected from burning the sap-filled stumps of pine trees. The pine soot is then combined with potassium nitrate and sulfur, ground very fine in a machine called a ball mill, and then the powder is ready to use. Tsutsui-san's recipe is a secret, but I have a recipe of my own that I can share. This recipe is of course inferior to the original, but it works adequately well. My recipe is 4 parts potassium nitrate, 2 parts sulfur, and 1 part lamp black. All of these ingredients must be measured by weight on a precise digital scale. The potassium nitrate and sulfur is ground extremely fine in a mortar and pestle until it's at least as fine as cornstarch. The finer the better. The lamp black is added last, as it is already a very fine powder. The grinding then continues until the whole mixture turns jet black. When finished, it should be indistinguishable in color from pure lamp black itself. Besides the powder, the other component of these sparklers is the paper. These are the papers used for Tsutsui Tokimasa Senko Hanabi. The measurements are 27 by 4 centimeters at the base, with a right angle on one side and an 82-degree angle on the other. This is a high-quality tissue paper, but the properties of the paper are of little consequence. For my own work in trying to recreate Senko Hanabi, I poured all of my effort into finding the right paper and perfecting the formula for the powder, but I was ignorant of the most important part in the whole process, the technique used to roll the paper. This, above all else, is how you make a Senko Hanabi that works consistently. Here I am watching very carefully as Tsutsui-san shows me how it's done. In order to learn, it's important to pay attention to exactly what he's doing with both of his hands, his finger position, the angle of the paper, and how tension is applied. The result is a sparkler that is wound so tightly the tissue paper has become stiff, almost like a piece of wire. I remember once reading a description of Senko Hanabi where the author suspected the stems might be stiffened with glue or some kind of binder. Now I understand the stiffness does not come from glue, but from very skilled craftsmanship in how the paper is wound. There are 4 distinct sections of a Senko Hanabi. The papers that are used for Tsutsui Tokimasa sparklers are dyed with a traditional color pattern which helps to identify each section. The head, identified with red dye, contains all of the powder, about 0.08 grams measured with a small scoop. The powder is placed into a fold, and starting from the corner, rolled up like a sausage, while the neck of the sparkler is pinched tight in the other hand. If this has been done with enough tension on the paper, the powder should be contained in a tightly packed pellet. If the head is rolled correctly, the paper will automatically be in position to roll the neck, identified by a green stripe along the edge of the paper between the red and yellow sections. The neck is rolled especially tightly because it will support the molten drop of sulfur when it's at its heaviest. A weak neck and the sparkler will fail as the drop falls off. Using the stripe as a guide, we can see the leading edge of the paper makes 5 or 6 turns right on the tightest part of the neck to reinforce it. Once the neck is reinforced, the angle of the trailing paper is stretched out to start distancing the wraps from one another, as can be seen thanks to the green stripe that now stretches into a spiral. This is how the body of the sparkler starts. Notice that the paper is being rolled, not twisted. The beauty of how these papers are colored only on one side is that if you roll them incorrectly, often the white portion will start to shine through. These are some of the first sparklers I rolled, and you can see I made many mistakes. The tail of the sparkler is simply a continuation of the body, where it will be held when lit, rolled in the same way as the body, with some left over as a decorative flare. And this one is finished. I've mentioned it already, but during this process, tension and finger placement are key. Tsutsui-san was very kind to show me in detail every step of the process, and even record this shot up close of how he works. Learning the technique for rolling these sparklers usually takes about a month of practice, and 1,000 failures before they are good enough to have a Tsutsui Tokimasa label. Ryota Tsutsui and his wife Kyoko are serious about the tradition of fireworks in Japan. They have worked tirelessly to preserve Senko Hanabi, and have built their business to be educational and uplifting to their community. They have school children visit and teach them about the tradition of fireworks. These sparklers are labeled with the type of metal powder they contain so the user can learn how different metals have different properties when they burn. This is an amazing company, and I've not even mentioned there's one more type of sparkler that they make here. Senko Hanabi literally translated means incense stick firework. Even many Japanese people that grew up lighting Senko Hanabi don't know why they're named after an incense stick. The name comes from a design that is even more ancient. One form of Senko Hanabi is wrapped in paper, as you've seen, but the oldest is made by dipping a very special kind of rice straw into a slurry of the powder formula, water, and glue made from animal hides. This creates a sparkler that is held upright instead of upside down, like an incense stick. The type of straw needed for these ancient Senko Hanabi has not been available in Japan for decades, which is why this sort of firework has been lost to time. But Tsutsui-san and his family care so much about preserving these uniquely Japanese fireworks that they have purchased rice fields specifically to grow the type of straw that is required. Somewhere in the middle of this trip, I asked Tsutsui-san if most people in Japan had seen his Senko Hanabi. As one of only 2 companies still making them in the whole country, I assumed that would be the case. But his answer was no. Like many things, there is competition from poorly made copies, imported from countries where labor is cheap. If you live in Japan where you can buy Tsutsui Tokimasa fireworks, do so. The quality is unmatched, and you'll be supporting a company that keeps these traditions alive and enriches their community.
When I make a video that is this in-depth, it usually requires several months of work. And in order to keep Moses' dish full of birdseed in that time, I raised some extra money by advertising for sponsors. For this video, I do have a sponsor, but I asked for a smaller payment than I usually would because I like what this company is doing. My sponsor is Tab for a Cause. This is a free browser extension that raises money for charity every time you open a new tab in your browser. The way it works is Tab for a Cause gives you a customizable homepage when you open new tabs, which displays some minimal advertising. Your views on those ads are worth money, and Tab for a Cause takes that money and divides it among a variety of charities. As you open tabs, you earn hearts, which allows you to influence how the money is divided. Charities that receive more hearts from users will receive a larger portion of the ad revenue. Tab for a Cause uses all open source code for transparency and publishes quarterly financial reports, so you can see exactly where the money is going. Again, this costs you nothing. You just install the browser extension, and every time you open a tab, charities make money. Over $850,000 has been raised for charity through the extension so far. Check out Tab for a Cause and get the extension through the link in the video description below. This video has been almost 15 years in the making as I've learned to make Senko Hanabi, first by myself, and now finally the right way as taught to me by Ryota Tsutsui. I would love if you would leave me a comment on this one. I still read every comment, and especially on high effort videos like this, I really appreciate hearing from you. Thanks for watching this video. I'll see you next time. Oh jeez, Mose.